I still remember the exact moment my peaceful Saturday morning turned into a nightmare. I was sipping coffee on my deck, watching the sunrise over Crystal Lake when I heard the mailbox slam shut strange. I thought ins mail doesn't run on weekends. When I walked down my driveway and opened that metal box, my blood pressure shot through the roof. The REIT was printed on official HOA letterhead. Notice a fine $150,000. My hands actually shook as I read the violation description: commercial event conducted without proper permits, unauthorized, business activity on residential property. The signature at the bottom belonged to none other than Karen Fitzgerald, our HOA president and self-appointed neighborhood dictator. The commercial event in question: I had invited 12 friends over for a barbecue last weekend. We grilled burgers, played cornhole, and took my boat out for some tubing. Apparently, in Karen's twisted interpretation of our bylaws, having more than 10 guests constituted running an unlicensed event venue. The woman had actually taken photos from her lakefront property dock, ending what she called evidence of my flagrant violations. I crumpled the letter in my fist, knowing this was Karen's latest power play. But this time she had gone too far. When I first moved to Lakeshore Estates 2 years ago, I thought I had found paradise. The community sits on the shores of Crystal Lake, a pristine 300-acre body of water, surrounded by towering pines and protected wetlands. Each property comes with lake access rights, and the community dock serves as the social hub where neighbors launch boats, fish, and enjoy summer evenings. I had left the chaos of city life behind, trading my downtown condo for this slice of tranquility. Little did I know that paradise came with its own special brand of hell. The form of Karen Fitzgerald. Karen had been HOA president for 6 years running, mostly because nobody else wanted the job badly enough to challenge hers. Her ruled with an iron fist wrapped in a velvet glove, a fake concern for property values. Her favorite phrases included "for the good of the community" and "maintaining our standards," which she used to justify everything from mandating specific mailbox call or still limiting the number of garden gnome spare yard. But Karen's true pride and joy wasn't their presidential power. It was her custom fishing rig, a gleaming 28 feet center console boat with twin 300 horsepower engines that she kept at the community dock. That boat was Karen's baby. She had it wrapped in a gaudy purple and gold design with Queen of the Lake emblazed across the hall. Every weekend, she would monopolize the main dock for hours, blocking other residents from launching while she loaded her gear. With theatrical slowness, the engines roared tell. I flew with enough noise to wake the dead, sending wave, scratching against neighboring boats, but nobody dared complain because Karen had a vintage streak wider than the lake itself. Itreed, the reasonable approach: first scheduling a meeting with the HOA board to dispute the fine. The board consisted of Karen and four other residents who seemed to exist solely to note along with whatever she said. It presented my case calmly, showing photos from the barbecue that clearly demonstrated it was just a casual gathering of friends. Karen sat at the head of the conference ta, like a queen holding court, her lips pursed in that perpetual expression of disapproval she had perfected over the years. The bylaws are quite clear, she said in that condescending tone that made my teeth grind. Any gathering exceeding 10 individuals requires prior approval and appropriate permits. You had 12 people, which puts you in violation of section 4.3.2. She's lit a copy of the bylaws across the table with the relevant section highlighted in aggressive yellow. Furthermore, the use of motorized watercraft for entertainment perp. OSAs without commercial insurance constitutes alienability risk to the association. I pointed out that her interpretation was absurd, that the rule was clearly intended for actual commercial operations, not friendly get-togethers. The other board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, but none spoke up to Harrison, who lived 3 houses down from him, actually started to open his mouth, but one sharp look from Karen silenced him. Instantly, she had them all trained like circus seals. After the meeting ended with my fine upheld, I found Tom in the parking lot. I looked around nervously before leaning in close. "Listen, Mike," he whispered. "You're not the first person she's done this to. Last year, she fined the Johnsons 20 grand for having a bounce house at their kids' birthday party. They ended up moving rather than fight it." They glanced back at the community center where Karen was still inside. "But between you and me, I heard from Jim at the marina that their boat might not be as legal as she thinks might be worth looking into." That conversation sent me down a rabbit hole of research that consumed my next 3 weeks. It started with the HOA bylaws, reading every mind-numbing pane. I moved on to county regulations, state boating laws, and finally the conservation easements that governed Crystal Lake. What I discovered made my jaw drop. Crystal Lake wasn't just any body of water. It had been designated as a protected watershed in 1998 with strict regulations on watercraft to preserve the ecosystem. According to the conservation documents, boats on Crystal Lake were limited to single engines with a maximum of 150 horsepower. The twin 300 horsepower monsters on Karen's floating purple nightmare were quadruplet the legal limit. Furthermore, the conservation easement specifically prohibited boats longer than 22 feet to prevent shoreline erosion. Karen's 28-footer was a blatant violation, but the real kicker, all watercraft required annual environmental impact permits, which had to be publicly filed. Quick records showed that Karen had never filed a single permit armed with this information. I contacted the State Department of Natural Resources. The woman who answered, Linda Martinez, became very interested. When I explained the situation, we take conservation violations very seriously. She said her ton professional, but with an edge that suggested she enjoyed catching violators will need. O conduct ton inspection, can you tell me when this boat is typically on the water is mild for the first time in weeks? Every Saturday and Sunday, usually from noon to 4. The owner likes to make a big production of launching from the community dock. It gave her all the details, including photos. I had taken off the boat's registration numbers, and those massive engines. Lindy assured mean inspection team would visit soon. The following Saturday arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, calm water, and temperatures in the low 8s position. Myself on my deck with a cupo, Effie coffee and binoculars, pretending to bird watch while actually keeping an eye on the community dock right on schedule. Karen arrived at 11:45, backing her massive trailer down the ramp. With practiced arrogance, she was wearing her usual weekend uniform of designer fishing gear that had never seen actual fish. Gut 12:30. Just as Karen was preparing to head out for her afternoon cruise, two official-looking trucks spooled into the marina parking lot for people in khaki uniforms, submerged, carrying clipboards and wearing badges that gull. Eamed in the sunlight, he watched through my binoculars as they walked purposefully toward the dock. Karen, who had just started here, and Jins noticed the map approaching and cut the motor even from 200 eyed away. I could see her body language's shift from confident to defensive. The leading inspector, a tall man with graying hair, showed his credentials and began speaking to Karen. She gestured wildly, pointing at their boat, and then at the other vessels in the marina. The inspector remained calm, taking notes, while his colleagues began photographing her boat from multi. Plingle son of them produced a measuring tape and began documenting the boat's length. Another was examining the engines, shaking her head as she wrote on her clipboard. The inspection lasted 45 minutes, during which a small crowd of residents gathered to watch the drama unfold. Karen's voice carried across the water, alternating between indignant protests and attempts at name-dropping Doe, who I am drifted clearly to my deck, followed by something about her cousin being a state senator. The inspectors remained professionally unmoved. Continue. Ink their methodical documentation. Finally, the lead inspector handed Karen what appeared to be several forms. Even without binoculars, I could see her shoulders slump in defeat. The inspectors returned to their trucks and drove away, leaving Karen standing on the dock next to her beloved boat. She stood there for several minutes before slowly walking back to her car, leaving the boat to the dock for the first time since moving to Lakeshore Estates. As Karen Fitzgerald looked small, the fallout was swift and glorious. Within 3 days, an official notice appeared. It on the community bulletin board by order of the State Department of Natural Resources. The vessel registered as Queen of the Lake was permanently banned from Crystal Lake. Due to multiple conservation violations, the notice detailed the infractions: excessive horsepower, illegal length, absence of required permits, and potential environmental damage from wake erosion. The boat's owner was given 7 days to remove it, to face daily fines of $500, but the conservation department wasn't done. Their investigation had revealed that Karen, in her role as HOA president, had been aware of the regulations, but had exempted herself from compliance. This constituted a breach of fiduciary duty, which meant she could face personal liability. The HOA's insurance company got wind of the situation and launched their own investigation into whether Karen's actions had exposed the association to legal risk. The special board meeting called to address the situation was standing room only for once. Karen sat in the audience instead of at the head table. The board's attorney, an on-sense woman named Patricia Stone, laid out the facts with surgical precision. Karen's abuse of power had potentially exposed the HOA to hundreds of thousands in liability. The bogus finesse he had issued, including mine, were not only unenforceable but could result in counterclaims for harassment. I make a motion to immediately rescind all fines issued by Karen Fitzgerald in the past 24 months pending review. Tom Harrison said, finding his voice at last. The motion passed unanimously. Then came the vote that everyone had been waiting for. If further motion for the immediate removal of Karen Fitzgerald. Does HOA president due to breach of fiduciary duty? Again, unanimous approval. The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Karen's face cycled through several shades of red before settling on a purplish hue that matched her band. Basha stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. You'll be hearing from my lawyer. She spat, but her voice cracked, betraying the bravado as she stormed toward the exit. Patricia Stone delivered the final